I'm going to try to explain something that's very, very abstract in the real world situation. I'm going to try to explain to you it in such a way that you understand something very, very abstract, but you can understand it in your real world scenario. So here we see lenses, glasses, goggles, different kinds of lenses. And now I want to use this example of different kinds of lenses that describe theories and theory-based communication. So these different lenses, you see the one on the left that there's a green lens, and then he's got some lenses up there that he could flip down on his and see through, right? And both of those have different lenses that different strengths. Well, what happens here is, let's say, for example, the green lens here on the left is what you probably consider your favorite lens. That's the thing that you gravitate to. That's your favorite theory. Like, say, for example, in the icebreaker, many people told me that they lean on information given to them by their grandparents or their parents. That leniency on someone else's theory could be a good example of using that green lens. So when you're looking through your own eyes, you're looking through your eyes. But when you put that lens on, you're kind of seeing things through your favorite theory, like grandpa used to tell you, or like your parent told you. And so the other lenses on the side that are attached to the main frame are examples of how it is if you were bringing down a different lens to examine the world through a different lens, So that's what theories do. Every theory, like the different theories that I introduce to you, is like clicking one theory, one lens up and putting another lens down. And I've been trying to get you guys to see the employee through a different lens. So to understand theories and how theories work on the academic level, picture in your mind the 1920s when people were still creating and inventing things like cars and airplanes and all kinds of other stuff in American ingenuity. They were inventing that stuff in their garages and in their barns. So for this example, pretend that you're a lens maker in your barn, or making and repairing lenses for other people to use in your workshop or for you. Well, that's the kind of ideology maybe that a theorist would have, creating new lenses and repairing old lenses. That's what these theories are like. You're like looking through a different lens when you can see the world through one of these theories. So to reiterate, everybody comes to the table with their own eyes or their own lens to begin for in the beginning, but later you learn to use other people's ideas and theories, and that'll be like having a different lens. So anyways, I'll go to the next slide. So today, in this lesson, I will reintroduce you to 3 elements of theories: epistemology, oxology, and ontology. You guys know about that. You already know about it. I'll discuss why theories are important and how you use them in academic writing, which is your theory paper. And to complete this exercise, you must first watch the employee video, which is our sample society. I use that video as my sample society. I use it all the time. But so yeah, to complete this exercise, you have to have already seen that society. And as a lens maker, this is the society that I use to help to teach students how to create lenses and how to modulate the lens and make sure it's going to get kind of exciting though. I mean, I don't know. Maybe if you're nerdy, it's exciting. But I'm not known for being nerdy, but I kind of am. But anyway, so let's talk about what you saw. And that's what the discussion was. What did you see? how do we get unity about what we saw? I mean, so if you read what other people what other people wrote, everybody saw something different. I mean, everybody brought flavor to it, but everybody saw something different. So how do you can deconstruct what we saw? And the integrity and the value systems in what we saw. So anyways, if you remember, here's how qualitative researchers and practitioners introduce themselves to one another. We did that. I'm Dr. Myrna Roberts, and here's how she introduced herself. The text introduces itself the same way, and the text introduces everything this way, and you guys introduce yourselves to me in this way, and this is the way you will introduce and deconstruct theories in all of my classes, and probably any other social science class that you have. This is how the science of deconstructing sociology, psychology, all those, using that. This is how it goes. So now I'm getting away from my script. So we're reviewing still. Let's start by reviewing what we discussed so far. The earlier stages of the lecture will seem like things you already know, but I'll just give you more information. I'm just trying to give you all of the information under one roof so it's not fragmented, so that you can see that this is one big story and I've just given you little bits and pieces all at the same time. So this is a philosophical way of scientific research. So you guys are scientists already. You're scientific researchers. And approaches are either qualitative or quantitative. That means it's either about quality or quantity. You're either using a bunch of words or you're using a bunch of numbers. So the qualitative ones are known as being interpretive theories or interpretive, and the quantitative ones, the ones that use numbers, try to be objective. They like to consider themselves objective. So the qualitative studies usually consider themselves case studies, while the quantitative ones are usually statistics. So let's make it clear. If you're talking about something that happens one time, that's a case. For example, if you get stopped by the police, young folks say, I caught a case. That's a case. Or if you got to go to a lawyer, you got a case with your lawyer. Or if you have to see a social worker or a psychologist, all of those are social sciences. And that is one case. Or, but when you're measuring by 100, so if something happens one time, it's a case. If it happens 100 times, that's a statistic. And what behavioral scientists try to do is try to measure that statistic. So generally, I use both. I try to use a mixed method. I explained to you guys earlier that I'm both deconstructionist and behavioral sciences. And that's the difference between the qualitative, But anyway, I don't want to go too far right there. So then we talked about epistemology of the field. We talked about oxology of a field, and we're talking about ontology. I didn't invent that. This is all very, very old. I think they should have taught it to us in kindergarten. So, anyways, here are some of the social sciences that use the same methods that I'm teaching you. So if you learn this, you're well on your way to some of the others. That's anthropology, communication studies, which is what we're doing. Economics, education, geography, history, law, linguistics, political science, psychology, sociology. All of these sciences or disciplines are using the same kind of research that I'm trying to show you now. So in our book, Griffin, scholars of the sciences understand that there are gaps in theories. and the theories can work, well, kind of, under all of the right conditions, if the situations are right. But if everything's not right, you can look at this graphic and see, well, if everything is not just right at all times, if the wind is blowing a little bit, this contraption might not work, you know. And that's kind of how theories are. So that's why we need you to help fill in the blank. So this came out of our text. Griffin shows theories looking like a hybrid invention where it only works right if all of the given conditions are right. Timing is everything. You get the understanding that this is working by the grace of God only. Whatever this is doing, it's barely working. And I wanted to show you this graphic so you would know that it really is a hand system, and it's always needing tinkering. It always needing someone to add to the body of knowledge. So theoretical foundations are important, but it's a work in progress, and the system is always being updated. So that's why it's so important for you to at times find out what the origin of a thing was and then what happened after. For example, in this class, the text will generally tell you what the origin of the theory is. But by and large, you'll have to do research beyond the textbook to find out what the latest information is. Because the gaps in the theories may have been filled in. As shown on this graphic, they could have been filled in since the textbook wrote. If that textbook was written in 2005, it's 2020. That's 15 years. A whole bunch of stuff could have happened. And so that's how come I'm trying to teach you to go beyond that. In your writing, you'll need to tell the whole story so that you'll know the processes and who and what the epistemology was and what person brought this piece of epistemology into the realm of understanding. And you guys are well on the way to doing that. It sounds hard, but you're kind of well on the way. And I'm kind of giving you a boost too, because I'm sending articles to people and helping them, I kind of helping them fill in their gaps. Okay, so epistemology is the knowledge, especially with regard to method, validity, and scope. I'll explain all that. Epistemology is the investigation of what separates opinion from fact. You can count on epistemology to make that difference. What's the difference between opinion and fact? Epistemology is about how we know what we know is true. How do you know what you know is true? So in the employee, in the little skit, in the video, the employee, we saw some things that distinguish, that can distinguish the opinion from fact. So what part of that video was opinion and what part of it was fact? That's kind of hard. How can I tell my opinion from my fact? How can I talk about situations? How can we as a group talk about situations? Like we're talking about police brutality. How can we figure out how to all of us get talking about the same thing at the same time and mean the same thing? How do you do that? Well, that's the same situation as here. Okay. Oxology. I really don't want to go through this because this is going to take a minute, but this is my personal oxology as a communicator. I've told you guys before that communication oxology is social justice, but the National Communication Association has issued a whole group of ethos, ethical communication, that for us, the first one is, I'll have to move this. We advocate truthfulness, accuracy, honesty, and reason is essential to the integrity of communication. And there's a reason why I'm reading these to you. We endorse freedom of expression, diversity of perspectives, and tolerance of dissent. That means I respect everybody's opinion. And I'm going to racing through it. We strive to understand and respect other communicators before evaluating and responding to their messages. We promote access to communication resources and opportunities as necessary. I think you guys know that. I'm going to make sure you get all the opportunities you can to get to the communication. We provide communication climates of caring and mutual understanding that respect the unique needs of others. I mean, and I'm trying to do this. We condemn communication that degrades individuals and humanity through distortion, intimidation, coercion, violence. So, I'm telling you these things is because I'm expecting you to see this reflected in my behavior. We are committed to the courageous expression of personal convictions. Again, I'm telling you all this for a reason. We advocate sharing information, opinions, and feelings. That's right up my alley. And we accept responsibility for short and long-term consequences of our own communication and expect others to do the same. Now, the reason why I told you all of that is because I expect y'all to hold me to that, because that's kind of what I'm holding you to. That's kind of what I come to the table expecting. So, and I'm moving along. Because I know I'm just what do you call it? Reviewing. You've already know this. Ontology is a set of concepts or categories in the subject. So, that's the review. So now let's just move a little bit deeper. And so this page right here came straight out of the Little John and False Encyclopedia. It's page 114. You don't have to go there now, but I'm going to use this new theory. This one down here, relational framing theory. It's only 2 paragraphs. So, and I'm just going to use that page, that little piece of that theory, to show you how to construct a framework for your theory. Okay, so on page 114 of our encyclopedia, it introduces the relational framing theory. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it says by saying that studies of interpersonal relationships consistently converge on the finding that they are arrayed along 3 dimensions. See, they start talking like arrayed along, or you got 3 dimensions or 3 domains, or there's 10 tenets to it. You got to pay real close attention to that kind of conversation, because they're giving you a clue when they say, oh, you got 3 different kinds, or they tell you that right off the bat. And so it says arrayed along 3 dimensions. I'm going to say affection, hostility, dominant, submission, and involvement, non-involvement. So when they told me that, the first thing I did is I did something that said affection, hostility, dominant, submission, involvement, non-involvement. I got that from the epistemology. I pulled it right out of the page and put it in a table. And then when you go on to read a little more, it just says the relational frames allows people to make sense of and understand the relational significance of what would otherwise be ambiguous behavior. So what happens is, I didn't say this, after you do your literature review, you find out all these elements, then you're going to perform an actual experiment. Something happens. You do that literature review and you have those questions, then you're picking that epistemology, you're picking that ontology out of the epistemology, and you're making those columns. You're trying to figure out how to gauge what you're looking for. So I'm building the framework of relational framing theory because I want to show you how to deconstruct this society, the employee. So in the employee, he was at home. We saw him at home. We saw him in the streets. We saw him at work. And there's something that happens after the credits. So we go to all the columns from the epistemology. In the original epistemology, this all came from Lil John and Foss. The rows where it says home, in the street, at work, and after the credits, that's how we break up the video into short segments. So whatever you're working on, if you're deconstructing a movie, then you would have scene 1, scene 2, or you would have the scenes there. If you're deconstructing ESPN film, then you would have film 1, film 2, film 3. If you're deconstructing YouTubes, then you would have, this is how you do that. Whatever it is that you're getting your sample data from, that's what you put in the rows. So now we're ready to deconstruct the employee as our sample society. And we're using the categories that the epistemology of the relational framing theory gave. That's the relational framing theory. That's where I got those columns from, those 2 little paragraphs. So before we can get started with our experiment, we got a little homework to do. Some work we have to do inside of our own self to search and figure out why you're doing the study anyway. Because technically, you should be doing your study on something that you're very, very passionate about. You should be investigating those things that you care about because you want to do investigation about something that you care enough about to see it all the way through. You can finish it. And you'll have a lot of integrity about the study while you're doing it. Well, there's this piece of work in my master's student. I invited them to this class today. And my master's students have to do implicit bias test and take care of their family history. That's work that the master students have to do. So you take these tests, and in this example, I'm going to say I took the implicit bias test and I found out that I'm prejudiced towards obesity. I'm not prejudiced towards obesity, but that's the kind of test you can find out what you're prejudiced. Are you prejudiced against dark people, light people, fat people, religious people, Muslims? You can take these tests, and that happened in my master's classes. And then there's this other piece. So you want to be sure and be honest about what's going on in your own family background. And I put, my family was enslaved in the U.S. That's something that is always going in my mind. That is something that is a controlling factor. Maybe not controlling, but it is very relevant. And you don't want to put these things in your table if they're not relevant. And this is your private work. Nobody's going to see this. So you can be honest. Nobody but you is going to see this. But since you guys haven't taken those tests, you could try to figure out what some of your personal biases are and what some of your family history is. And if you wanted to kind of, so that you can understand your culture better and you can understand your own family background so that when you bump into your stuff while you're doing this study, you won't be too prejudiced when you see your own stuff. You're out, and I'll show you what that means. I'll show you how to balance it out. So there's a piece of work that you have to do before you can start the study to figure out what your own biases are. If you know them, if you know what they are and they are relevant to the study, you could, for example, put them in a table. And so what I do with that table is I actually add those on the end of my own. So I'm doing this study. I'm saying I recognize that someone has told me that I have a bias against obesity. And I was enslaved in America, so I got that kind of bias. I'm mad about that. So now that we've done that, we're ready. So now here we go. We're starting to study. So I'm looking at the video, and the guy's in his home. So all while he's in the home, did I see any affection? Nope. I put a 0. Did I see hostility? Okay, then I had to go look up hostility. And that said unfriendly and antagonistic. Well, usually what the words mean, you'll find that in the study. But just for a quick reference, I just looked up hostility. So, even though everybody was lifeless and they looked like they didn't care, that was unfriendly to me. It was antagonistic. That was antagonistic. Sitting on people? You sitting on people? Oh, no, that was antagonistic to me. I go to the next one. Dominance. Did I see dominance? Yes. Yes, I did. Oh, I forgot to tell y'all something. Right here, if you put numbers in these boxes, by and large, you're doing quantitative study. If you're putting words in these boxes, by and large, that's qualitative. But if you're putting words, then you need to put a lot of words. You need to be like paragraphs. And I'll show you why. And I'm off. So anyways, I saw him. He was submissive to the clock and to the mirror. That's what I thought. But I know they're talking about relationship to people to people, but I still saw submission to a clock in the mirror. So I wrote that down. You might not have saw that. So then I go to the next one. I didn't see any involvement, and I saw non-involvement, so I put a 0. There wasn't any fat people or obese people in there, but I said people looked enslaved to me. The children were enslaved, and dude abused his family in the bathroom. His daddy was enslaving his children, his wife. It was terrible. And I'm pretty much, I'm talking like Myrna talks when I'm typing that, because this is my private document. Nobody's going to see this but me. And I got to be sure to put my flavor, just a little bit of me, no swearing or anything like that. It's professional, but still, I am who I am. But so I went back, and then I did the night when he went to the street. While he was in the street, I didn't see any affection, none. I saw hostility. He was riding on people's back and stuff, and just got a whip almost. I'm being over, I'm being, I don't know, overreacting, but I'm just trying to get y'all to laugh too. But that's kind of who I am. I saw some stuff. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm an activist now. Homegirl don't play this right here. That's kind of who I am inside.
Right.
Scientists don't know that that's what be going on in here. But anyway, so, but when I get over there, involvement, no, non-involvement. I said there was an obese man, and he was enslaved, and I felt, I typed a whole bunch of stuff. It just made me mad, and I had to go back and recheck because they said I don't like fat people, and I really didn't take the test. The test really didn't say that I have an aversion to obese people. I'm just using that as an example. And so then I went back while he was at work, 0 affection, yes, hostility, yes, dominance, yeah. Oh, but up here, I said, you know what? He was showing submission to the stoplights and to his watch to me. So then, but one here, because that's where he laid down and let that man lay on his back. Right there. That was the only submission. Involvement. Then I got over here, oh my God, the woman was in a locker. I would call the police. It was brutality all over the place. It was just awful. But so you see my ontology in there. I mean, my oxology. You see how things ought to be. That's why I took that time and read all that to y'all, so that you would know that as a communicator, I had red flags going everywhere because there was no social justice. And when you're talking about social justice, it doesn't matter if the people are all right with being treated bad. It doesn't matter if they've been groomed to do that. Why they doing that doesn't really matter yet. But I'm overreacting, and I'm doing that for y'all's benefit. But then it went on, and something happened after the credits. And I wrote liberation. I'm praying the slaves don't go back to Egypt. So anyways, that was funny. But so then here's some totals. So I added those up. That was 4. I added that up. That was 3. And there was only 1 right there, but by and large, dude was submitting to objects. That was weird. See, I never would have come up with that had I not one by one, but I noticed, the information starts to emerge when you start using ontology. The information just starts to tell its own story, and the story that it starts to tell you never would have got if you had not categorized things. What this is about, these red columns over here, this is about checking myself. Self-mediated behavior, reflecting, checking myself. At every juncture, I'm going across here saying, okay, were you prejudiced against somebody? Did you treat somebody wrong? And I did you make a snap judgment on someone and you don't know that you did that? I mean, I'm telling the truth about my personality and what's going on with me in there. That is a self-check. That is self-mediated behavior. And that's how I bring validity back to my study. So, in your results. So now we're back to your paper. You've done your experiment. It's over. You're in the results section of your theory paper. This other thing that you did, it's in an Excel document somewhere that nobody's going to see but you. But now you've come to your theory paper, and you got to the results section, which is the very next thing that we have after your literature review, and you have those little questions. You perform the experiment, and boom, the next thing is the results. So you're just going to put so if you have only a few entries, like less than 20, like it's only 20 rows, then you can neatly situate your table in the results section of the theory paper. Just boom. You can set that thing right there. But if you got 100, you did a movie and it's 145 rows, just put the totals. Just like I have right here, put the totals. And then you explain concisely explain what the table means. I mean, the results section is very short. Boom. Here's what I found. And here's how this is related to my questions. This is the answer to my question was boom. Okay, so in this thing with the employee, I didn't have a research question or a hypothesis, but in our papers, you have a research question that you're trying to answer that question. That's what you're looking for. You're trying to answer that question. So, and anyways, that's just right there. I don't know where I am. So then in the discussion part, you've moved on to the conclusion. And in your conclusion, there's this thing called a discussion. And you remember all that crazy typing that I had in there where I had my own personality? It was in red. I dropped it right into the paper in red so that you would know, so that I would know this is some crazy homegirl talking. And you can't have homegirl vernacular in academic writing. So you're going to change that. So let me read what I wrote over here. In the conclusion, there is a discussion section where you can reflect. Here is where you tell what you think, what your passion was, why you entered. I spelled entered wrong. Why you entered into the study to begin with. You don't have to divulge too much of your own personal business, but still, that honesty, that red column over there where, hey, you're checking yourself, that's where a lot of the good stuff from your paper is going to come from in that discussion part. So that's what gives validity to your study. So if you can read what I wrote initially, I dropped the information from my framework into the discussion section exactly the way I wrote it. I just told you that. So in scene 1, I felt angry because people enslaved, blah, blah, blah. That's what I wrote. Those are the exact same words that you saw on the other slide in my table. But when I go to changing it, I wrote, okay, the homegirl vernacular is changed to academic standard. In scene 1, American federal standards were breached because children were kept in captivity. It appears the protagonist enslaved his own family. His father was confined to the bathroom, his children, his wife, blah, blah, blah. When he got to work, one woman, for example, was enslaved in a locker. It was such a brutal way that blah, blah, blah. The sample society shows evidence of being paradoxical in nature. The society is caught in an apparent self-fulfilling prophetic paradigm that equates to a nation of enslaved people caught unaware. Look at that. I got all that from that homegirl stuff. My phone's ringing, and she won't stop calling either. So that's it. That's it. That is how you use your theory, the words in your theory to create columns to do your study. Now, if you're doing a study that's not numbers, then you won't have all those columns. You'll just be typing. You'll have the columns as you do the experiment, but you may not have O's and ones and stuff. You might not have if I told you that you could do an ethnography, that's qualitative. But by and large, I'm going to want everybody to have a table in that result. It was just that theory just had 2 paragraphs, and I gleaned all that stuff from them 2 paragraphs. So what I'm saying is, let's say you have one and it has 10 columns. Some of those columns you can drop off. I hesitate to tell you that. Maybe you might not, all 10 of those columns may not be relative to your study. This thing is very nuanced toward what you are doing. I could give 2 people the same subject and the same theory, and it would come out different because why? They have different backgrounds, different biases, just different stuff.